Hi friends, welcome to New Jyothi Publications SSLC A Plus online classes. I'm here to deliver a session from history. So students, today let's begin with the first chapter, Revolutions that Influence the World. So before going into the chapter, I'd like to ask a question to my dear friends. What will happen if we put a free bird in a cage? What do you think? Yes, it will flap its wings and will try to free itself from the cage, right? Actually, what does it yearn for? Like this bird, the people who lack freedom tend to fight for it. Have you heard this famous line by Kumaranashan? Swatantriyam thanne amrutam, swatantriyam thanne jeevidam, Paratantriyam hridiyekal bhayanagam. These lines are taken from the poem Udbodhanam, and it was written by the famous Malayalam poet Kumaranashan. He actually says about that freedom is life and lack of freedom is terrible than death. So friends, now I'd like to give you a short description regarding the topic freedom. Before entering into the chapter, let's discuss on that. Do you know that in olden days, in several places of the world, the common people did not have as much freedom as we have today? The people who were deprived of freedom had to fight for it. So, in order to get freedom or in order to procure freedom, they have gone through various struggles. And all these struggles try to change the system which prevailed in that time. The system that denied their freedom and rights. They not only try to change but to establish a new one. They need to remove that existing one. So, we can discuss some of those struggles which created history. And you should note that they were revolutions that influenced the whole world. So now it's time to discuss on such revolutions. So we shall learn some more about such revolutions. Now children, before going to discuss about the revolutions, let's discuss some of the factors that affected those revolutions. Okay, so the major factor that stimulated earlier revolutions was Renaissance. And we shall discuss about the Renaissance and its impacts. Okay, so Renaissance actually gave rise to progress in the field of science. This progress led to enlightenment. So, children, before discussing about enlightenment, we shall discuss about Renaissance and its major facts. They were humanism, scientific temper, and rational thinking. So these were the major factors that influenced or stimulated earlier revolutions. Humanism means Manavigada in Malayalam. Scientific temper means Shastra Bodham. And rational thinking means Yukti Chinta. These noble ideas motivated people to question irrational beliefs and traditions. That means it made progress in the field of science. So, these factors led to the Enlightenment, this humanism, scientific temper, and rational thinking. Now, after discussing Renaissance, let's go on to the next topic, that is Enlightenment. So, it was an intellectual and cultural movement. It gave importance to reasoning and opined that society is always progressing. It also propagated the ideas of freedom, democracy, equality, and nationalism. And on the whole, enlightenment was a protest against autocracy. Now, children, let's discuss about the first revolution which is given in your textbook. It's about American Revolution or American War of Independence. Now, let's see what led to the revolution in the United States of America. So, before that, we have to go through a slogan. That is, No taxation without representation. Let's see what does this slogan actually meant. No taxation without representation. Actually, this is a slogan framed by James Otis. He actually delivered this slogan, no taxation without representation. And you should note that name, James Otis. And this slogan had thundered along different parts of North America. And it was raised by the people of America as part of a powerful agitation. Now, why the slogan was raised? Or why these people, or why it had thundered along different parts of the world? Or why that agitation came? Let's discuss on all these questions. So, with this slogan, they actually demanded something. Okay, let's see what was their demand. So, as we have discussed, no taxation without representation. Now, let's discuss on the demand through the slogan. What was their demand? They actually wanted a representation in government. That was the slogan, representation in government. And friends, I'm asking you, can you find other demands from the slogan, no taxation without representation? One was representation in government. You can find some others as well. Now let's discuss about migration of Europeans to North America. The Europeans or the British began to migrate to North America from the 16th century onwards. Actually, the Europeans' aim was to exploit the resources, which was in North America. So, children, keep it in mind that the British or the Europeans, their chief aim was to exploit the resources which was in the parts of USA, or especially you have to stress out that it was North America which they focused on. Now, let's see the 13 colonies in North America. Yes. First one was New Hampshire. Second one, Massachusetts. Third one, Rhode Island. Fourth one, New York. Fifth, Connecticut. Sixth, New Jersey. 7, Pennsylvania. 8, Delaware. 9, Virginia. 10, Maryland. 11, North Carolina. 12, South Carolina. And 13, Georgia. So you have to note down these 13 colonies in North America, and they are very, very important. Now let's discuss about the Red Indians. And children, when you go through the textbook, there is a small box regarding Red Indians and Christopher, the picture of Christopher Columbus. Now let's see. Have you heard about Christopher Columbus? Yes, I think you have heard in your lower classes that he had discovered America. Now, before that, we should learn something more about his relation with North America. Okay, he was actually a sailor of the Spanish government, and he had reached North America in 1492. That may be the second half of the 15th century. He called the indigenous people as Indians, whom is Christopher Columbus. He actually called the natives of India as Indians, or indigenous people as Indians. Indigenous means, children, native. Okay. Next one. He thought that the place he reached was India. Okay. He thought that the place he actually reached was India. And later they were known as Red Indians. So Christopher Columbus actually called the Indians as Red Indians. Now let's discuss on Mayflower and Pilgrim Fathers. Have you heard about Pilgrim Fathers? No, I think you haven't heard about. Now, who were Pilgrim Fathers? Actually, they were a group of people who exiled to USA or America in the religious persecution of the King of England in the 17th century on a ship called Mayflower. So children, keep it in mind that Mayflower is the name of a ship. And Pilgrim Fathers were a group of people who came who came to America in the religious persecution of the King of England. And it was during the time of 17th century. Now let's discuss on Boston Tea Party. Yes, it's very, very important when you learn about American War of Independence. So children, you have to go through this Boston Tea Party very thoroughly. Okay, so let's see what do you mean by this Tea Party, or what is its significance with the name Boston. It was actually a protest against the high tax levied by the British government on tea. So actually we have already learned about the first demand, no taxation without representation. Then one of their demands was representation government. So the main agitation of the people was against the high levy of taxes. So here Boston Tea Party was a protest or was an agitation against the high tax which was levied by the Europeans on tea. The commodity was tea. And this led to a fire or a strong protest in America. So the people agitated violently on this high levy of taxes on tea. So you should point out this or you should learn this date by heart. That is on 16 December 1773, a group of people disguised on the Red Indians, on 16 December 1773, a group of people disguised as the Red Indians, and they boarded the ships at night in the Boston harbor and threw 342 chests of tea into the sea. So this was the Boston Tea Party. So let me recollect again. On 16 December 1773, you have to note down this date. A set of people disguised as Red Indians. And what did they do? They boarded their ships at night in the Boston harbor. So Boston Tea Party here, Boston means it's the name of a harbor or Turamugam. And they threw 342 chests of tea into the sea because of this high levy of taxes. Or the Europeans demanded high taxes. So the people agitated, and that was the significance of Boston Tea Party. Okay, so you should learn it thoroughly, and it played a very, very pivotal role in the American War of Independence. Now, yes, children, coming back to the next topic. Yes, after discussing about Boston Tea Party, now let's move on to some of the philosophy or the ideologies of thinkers or philosophers who were against the exploitative laws of the British government or the Europeans. So the first person or the first philosopher was John Locke. You have to note down this quote, his sayings. He said that everyone has some fundamental rights and no government has right to suspend them. These were the words of John Locke. Next we shall discuss about another philosopher, and he is Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine, children, he has another important significance when you go through the American War of Independence history. Okay, he said that there is something absurd in supposing a continent like North America be perpetually governed by a foreign power like England. Okay, let me recollect again. There is something absurd in supposing a continent, North America, be perpetually governed by a foreign power, England. And do you know that Thomas Paine's famous work is Common Sense? Now, let's switch on to the next topic, that is mercantilism. The Europeans or the British people they considered or treated the American colonies as centers for collecting raw materials for their industry. See, we have to note down that initially we have discussed that the main intention or the aim of Europeans was to exploit the resources, the available resources in North America. So we can relate that point here itself. So as part of mercantilism, or the concept mercantilism actually stresses about the Europeans' intention to collect raw materials for their industry. And they considered the North America as a market for selling their products. And this mercantilist policy implemented by the Europeans with the help of their motherland in the American colonies is called mercantilism. So that's all about mercantilism. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is mercantilist laws. So children, the goods that collected from North America or from the American colonies, these were collected by the Europeans. So these goods to and from the colonies must be carried only in British ships or ships built in the British colonies. This was one of the mercantilist laws that was implemented by the Europeans. That is, the commodities should be carried only in their British ships or the ships built in the British colonies. That was one of the first laws. Second one, the commodities like sugar, wool, cotton, tobacco, which were the products of the colonies, could only be exported to England. Okay, and you have to learn all these commodities, children: sugar, wool, cotton, tobacco. Now, next demand was that on all the legal documents, newspapers, pamphlets, license, their stamp must be affixed. Whose stamp? British stamp, or the European government stamp should be affixed on all the legal documents, newspapers, license and pamphlets. And this was one of the third demands of the mercantilist laws. Now, let's see the fourth law. Food and quarters must be provided by the colonies for the British troops which were maintained in the colonies. So, food and the quarters must be provided by the American colonies for the British contingent or troops which were maintained in the colonies. And the fifth law was import tax must be paid for the import or importation of the commodities like tea, glass, paper, etc. So import tax must be paid. So these are all about the mercantilist laws. Now let's discuss about another significant event which took part in the American Revolution, that is the First Continental Congress. So children, it's very, very important. Now let's see what do you mean by the First Continental Congress, or what is its significance. Actually, the delegates of all colonies except Georgia met at Philadelphia in 1774. See children, I hope you have remembered about the 13 colonies which we have discussed in the initial section. So we have 13 colonies and the last one was Georgia. So here Georgia have an importance that the delegates of all colonies from New Hampshire to, I think, the last one was, yes. Do you remember that New Hampshire, we have begun from New Hampshire? Yes. And the last one was Georgia. In between, it was South Carolina. Okay. So children, note down that except Georgia, the other colonies like New Hampshire to South Carolina, the delegates from all these colonies should or met at Philadelphia in 1774, except the colony Georgia. So you have to note down that. So you need to learn those 13 colonies as well. Okay. So it was a protest against the policies and rules imposed by England. So you should learn that the First Continental Congress was actually a protest against the policies and rules imposed or implemented by the European government. Now let's see the causes that led to the war between England and the American colonies. So, children, when you learned the revolution, yes, you knew that it is a struggle. So, at last, the struggle came forward. Okay? So, let's discuss their causes that led to the struggle between the European government as well as the American colonies. People of colonies submitted petition to the King of England. So they demanded that the revocation of the regulations enforced on industry and commerce. Revocation means cancellation. Okay? So they need to cancel, or they want the cancellation of all the regulations as well as the rules enforced on industry and commerce, which we have discussed earlier. Their next demand was that not to impose tax without the approval of the people. So that was their main demand. So they want representation in government. So children, just go through that. One of the demands was representation in government. So here, the main cause that led to the war between England and colonies was that their main demand was not to impose tax without the approval of the people, without the consent or the permission of the people. But what did the king do? The king, in turn, sent a military force to suppress the people. He didn't actually accept the demand of the people. So, this led to the revolution. Right, children? Next, let's discuss about the Second Continental Congress. It was also held at Philadelphia, like the First Continental Congress. And it was held in the year 1775. And children, you should learn that, or you should highlight this point, that the person, George Washington, he was elected as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. See again, George Washington was elected as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. And next point was Thomas Paine, which we have discussed earlier. And he declared that it was wise for the American people to break the ties with Britain through the pamphlet Common Sense. Through his work, so children, you should understand like this, that through the pamphlet Common Sense, which is very, very famous work, Thomas Paine actually tried to declare that it was wise for the American people to break the ties with the European people. Yes? So, just go through that point. The significance of the persons like George Washington, Thomas Paine, yes, in the Second Continental Congress. Their significance or their importance in the Second Continental Congress, which was held in 1775. Now, children, let's discuss about the next, famous Declaration of Independence. Yes, it was in July 1776 that the famous Declaration of Independence was issued by the American Continental Congress. So, students, you should note down this very, very important factor, or the fact, yes, the famous Declaration of Independence. And you should remember these dates as well. Okay, First Continental Congress in 1774, Second Continental Congress in 1775, then the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and the month was July. And Declaration of Independence was framed or prepared by Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. Okay, so don't forget this. Declaration of Independence was prepared by Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. So, now thus the war between England and the colonies ended in 1781. Now let's discuss on another important fact, that is Treaty of Paris. It was actually an agreement. Yes. So, the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783. So, what is the significance of this treaty? Actually, England ratified the freedom of 13 colonies. That is, they gave this consent, or they permitted or they gave freedom to the 13 colonies. So this is the significance of the Treaty of Paris. Yes, and it was signed in 1783. Now, the last one is American Constitution. So, children, now let's see about American Constitution. It was under the leadership of James Madison that American Constitution was formed, or it was framed in the Constitution Convention held at Philadelphia, the same place where the first as well as the second Continental Congress were held. So, it was framed by James Madison, American Constitution. And again, George Washington, he became the first president of USA, or United States of America, which was formed in accordance of the new Constitution. And thus, let's say that the American War of Independence transformed the whole system that existed there. Okay, so these are all about American War of Independence. So, children, before winding up the session, yes, I'd like to inform you that there are a lot of questions regarding the previous questions and answers and fresh questions as well. They are all included or published in the new Jyothi SSLC A+ rank file. So you can refer to that. Okay. So it's very, very important. So you should please go through all those questions, which is very, very relevant for the exam.